What can I say, everyone? You're going to love today's show. It's with David.Knies, longtime friend, great speaker, great guy, uh, self-professed international man of mystery. I mean, what more can you ask for? Dave and I speak for a little while today about our experiences, customer journey, and a lot of other stuff in between. Please enjoy. So we're here with Dave.Knies here. Dave, I can't believe you stepped so low to join a low league podcast hosted by me, but I am grateful for that. And I guess full disclosure to everyone, Dave and I have known each other, I think, since the beginning of time. I think we met, Dave, I was thinking about it. I think we actually met in 81 or 82, which I think probably to many people is just like the Civil War time. And since then, Dave has gotten, I think, great success. Dave, from afar, I've followed your career, and I've always been amazed how you've bebopped from places working in Europe and then in the States, and it seems like you're in a very cool industry. And I'm glad for you to join today. I really wanted to speak with you. I've been for the last 20 some years dealing in the CRM space, working for the big four consulting firms, both operationally and then also consultative as well. And recently I've been focusing primarily on large scale CRM systems. I'm helping people get out of situations that either the systems aren't meeting their expectations or not. There's a lot of reasons for that, technical and non-technical. And I've written a couple books on the topic. And then in the past year, I've been focusing a lot on AI automations and how they're taking over seemingly the world. And I am just happy to have you here talking about your industry, any kind of customer journey, including your own personal journey. I would love to get into. If you could just real quickly just introduce yourself to the audience, anyone who may not know you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Great to be here. Great to see you. Appreciate you having me on. And that 81, 82 you referenced for the listeners is 1981, 82, not 1881 or 1781, just to be
I
clear.
don't know if there's a big difference in most people's mind, but yes, that's true.
Exactly. Dark ages, no matter what. So yeah, we've known each other a long time. And since you asked what I do, I work for a firm called PA Consulting, PA like the abbreviation for Pennsylvania. And I lead our work in the United States in human insights, market research, and innovation strategy. And I also lead our global practice that works in sports, fitness, wellness, and the convergence of healthcare and consumer. So
Wow.
lots of interesting stuff there, and I've been at PA for just about 7 years after about a 30-year kind of real, interesting career with a lot of different stops.
Yeah, Dave, when I go back to when we were younger and had more hair, I remember you being involved in sports and always interested in sports. And I actually had a flashback maybe a week ago, that when you and I were in high school, I was riding my bike a lot back then, and I was going to like Williamsburg, Virginia with my father and things like that. And I remember, and I still don't know if it's true today for you, but you and I used to scan through bicycle magazines, and I clearly remember going over. I'm going to mispronounce the name. Is the bike park company? Is it Campagnola? Campagnola? And
Campagnolo.
I remember like you and I drooling over these things because at the time we were going through Europe, and I remember looking at this and kind of like dreaming about all these people going from hostel to hostel using all these really cool bikes with all these really cool parts. So I guess I obviously made a big divergent from that world of sports. And if I'm hearing this right, you still incorporated that sport world into your career.
Yeah, it's how I got started. If you remember back in school, I was really into kind of European sports at that point. Obviously also into, the core
Mm-hmm.
American sports like football and baseball and hockey and basketball and everything like that. I got kind of early on, I got caught by the bug with German soccer randomly. There had been a show on PBS, if you remember WHYY back when, called Soccer Made in Germany. And I got really kind of caught up in following that. It was on every Saturday afternoon, and it was a tape delayed match that was fun to watch, and that got me into kind of following that. There you go, FC Bayern. But that's kind of what got me. And I used to try to find foreign magazines. Remember, they used to sell them at
Yep.
like tobacco stores, and I would buy soccer magazines and cycling magazines and F1 magazines that were all kind of in German, French, Italian, things like that. I bought a shortwave radio so that I could tune in and kind of listen to broadcasts and news and things like that. And then realized that no, I didn't understand the language. So I just set about learning German and then bits of other ones. But what I really wanted to do with all that, and my dream was to kind of go be James Bond, international man of mystery and be a spy or some crazy stuff like that. And as I was graduating from Villanova, was doing my interviewing, wasn't too psyched about a lot of the other opportunities that were out there, but I was in the interview process with some of the government agencies and ended up washing out at some point. They ghost you after you do tests and interviews and go meet them in person and all that stuff. And at some point, when you drop out of the process, you just never hear back. I still, to this day, believe they called. My roommates took the message and never got it to me. But as one of them said, they would know how to find you. So don't blame me. But I decided to do the next best thing and buy a one-way ticket to Germany after graduation and go over and interview and kind of try to find jobs. So I ended up getting a role in the management training program for Adidas. And it was at the time, Adidas World Headquarters is in Germany in a little town outside of Nuremberg, where Puma is also based. And it was the time when Adidas was going through a big kind of shift and transition as a company, shifting from a family run, family owned multinational business into a global publicly traded conglomerate, kind of the brand that it is,
Right.
but really had to go through some difficult times to get there. So it was a really interesting opportunity and window, and timing and luck kind of played a big part in getting me started that way.
So your German at that point was good enough to do that, obviously.
Yeah, I took it not only all through high school and through the travels we had, but I won a scholarship from the German government during our junior year to go over for a few months. I was away for a while and went to school in Nuremberg, went to a gymnasium, kind of a high school equivalent, and lived with a family for a while. And when I moved back or wanted to move back, it was right when the Berlin Wall was coming down. And I ended up staying with that family again for a few weeks while I got my feet under me. And I was the only person coming from the West. Everybody else was coming from the East as the Iron Curtain came down. So it was a wild time in history to be there, too. It was the end of 1989.
That is absolutely fantastic. And I can see why in the German classes that we had together, why you were in the first row and I was in the back row. Because there's no way, even to this day, I mean, there's just no way I could have made it. I always wish I could. And maybe I just didn't have the interest in the specific things that you were. I'll give myself an excuse because I didn't have an application for my German. Hindsight being 2020, I wish I did, and I wish I took more French considering the amount of time I spend in France every year. I know enough German to get myself around. I don't know enough German clearly to speak at, like a B1 level or whatever the case may be. But that's really, really, and I remember hearing way back when that you were working for Adidas, and Adidas and Puma actually have a family connection, right? Yeah, I
Two
mean,
brothers. Two
yeah,
brothers that kind of had a feud. One, they had kind of been working together on Adidas and they got in a fight, something that probably involving a woman. It was rumored. And the other one kind of walked out and went across the little river that divides this little town and started Puma. And the little town is fascinating. It's a village, and each side of the village has its own cleaners, restaurants, butcher shops, sports clubs, etc. Like there's the Adidas side and the Puma side, and they
come
never
on.
meet. People in this little village never crossed over.
Yeah,
It was
well,
literally like East and West Berlin.
there should be a movie made on that because that's just too funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never knew that when I was younger, and somehow a long time ago, I started wearing Puma. The what are they called? Clyde. I think the brand it's
Slides.
Clyde.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Walt
and I
Fraser.
because they come in all these crazy colors, and I always loved them. I still do. So you, Dave, you've been running for a while now. You just got done the Boston Marathon on April 21st, I think it was.
Yep. Yep.
And how do you at all tie that world into what you do motivationally, even from a bit, direct business level? How do you tie that into your regime?
Yeah, sure. A few different ways. So I decided when I turned a large round number, 50, that I would use my legs to raise money to fight cancer every year for as long as I
Hmm.
could do it. I vowed I'd try to raise $1 million in my life, and I would do that by doing a marathon or some other challenge every year. In Boston, we have obviously the Boston Marathon. We also have a thing called the Pan Mass Challenge, which is a cycling-based fundraiser that goes from one end of Massachusetts to the tip of Cape Cod. So I do one of those two things every year to raise money for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And so that not only ties into what I do for work, we do a lot of work with sports companies, sports brands, but we do a lot in healthcare, biopharma, and all the areas that those two intersect. So not only being inside the industry from, my time with Adidas and a bunch of other companies there, but also kind of in the fundraising world, you can see it directly. So we do a lot of medical device design and development. We do a lot of work with hospitals, helping them improve their patient experience, all kinds of things like that. So seeing it not only from the outside through the patient's eyes, but also from the inside through the business eyes, it's something unique. And a lot of the fundraising comes from colleagues,
Mm.
companies with donation matches and all kinds of things like that. It's a little bit of, I guess it's become a little bit of my personal brand at this point, or a little bit too dominant in my personality, but it's fun to be able to do that. And I think what I've noticed is, especially every day, whatever you do, whether it's running, whether it's yoga, whether it's walking, whether it's stretching, whatever that might be, is the key to living better and healthier. So for me, that's, core to what I am and what I believe.
And do you think that translates into your daily business practice?
I do in a lot of ways. I think getting a morning workout in, I always feel 1,000% better when I have. I've noticed I perform better. And also, I think with all the companies we work with in the space, it's important to be part of what's happening in the
Being
industry.
relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. So, being part of the scene, I think is really important.
What I have to say, so I think it's obvious, but maybe to some people it's not obvious. When you talk about running marathons, I was running half marathons. I was doing a lot of long distance open water swims. I guess the most notable is the Alcatraz to the Golden Gate swim. And to do that, I was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning when I was in Manhattan and going up to Asphalt Green, which is a big Olympic pool
Yep.
up near Harlem, and I loved it. When I was in the groove, I loved it. And I'd do that in the morning. I'd be out of the pool by 5:30. I'd run back to the office, I'd shower, and I was just in such a routine. And I agree with you. It did work out well. But the interesting thing is, for at least for me, is that while you're in the groove was relatively easy. But if you kind of trip and fall out of the groove, man, it's hard to get back in. It was very hard. And quite frankly, I never got back into it full force. I just couldn't. I mean, you'd mentioned yoga, you'd mentioned stretching. I didn't do either one of them to the level I should have. And I was just starting to hurt my body, and it kind of bummed me out. But once I stopped it, you effectively stopped. And I still did half marathons after that, but even them, I've stopped recently, and I would like to get back into it. I just have to figure out a way to ease myself in there without completely collapsing my body on the side of the road somewhere. So I think it's very impressive, and it is its own form of addiction for me. I mean, it was. And the funny thing about it is I did it because I found that the only way to motivate myself, with those type of events is to almost pick something that scares me. And it's like I once saw people swimming when I was in San Francisco on a work trip doing the San Francisco to, I think it's called Aquatic Park, the ports or the wharf. And I'm like, what if I see the people getting out of the water, and I'm like, if that guy can do it, I can do it too. And then I just signed up for it. And then I'm like, okay, how am I going to get from here to there? And I kind of scare myself into it, which worked every time. I haven't failed at doing that yet. Except I remember the first time I did that Alcatraz race, I was way early in the morning. It was a boatload of us going out to the opposite side of Alcatraz because you had to swim around it and then go out to the Golden Gate. And everybody sitting around me were Navy SEALs, and they were 20 years younger than me. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I actually doing here? But it was fun. I mean, in its own sense of way. So I never really put it into practice at work like you have. I mean, it directly correlates to what you're doing, and I think it does have to help you make you relevant in that world. So that's pretty damn cool. And I'm quite frankly jealous that you're able to find something that if I could have turned any of that into my business model, I mean, I can't imagine how much cooler that would have been. So let me ask you a question about customers. So you're talking about your consulting firm, branding, marketing. Who, from an outsider looking in, I would see that you have many levels of customers, right? You have the customers that you're selling your services to, and then you also have the customers that ultimately you're making something for your customer to provide for their customer. So how do you work with that? Like, where do you focus? How do you differentiate that, and how do you know what to sell to the person who's going to be buying from you, the right product that they can then in turn sell to someone else?
Sure. So we're in the business of expertise, and ultimately, what someone is looking for is expert guidance to solve a problem, help them improve their probability of success, go further faster, do all those things. Hopefully, we're never quote unquote selling per se, even though that's obviously what we're doing. But ultimately, we're trying to help people succeed and succeed faster and get where they want to go faster. So I think the big thing there is being a go-to for people who need help. That's really what the business of expertise, what consulting is about, is when people need help that they think of you or their firm or the firm you're working for as the person they're going to call for help. And that could be, hey, I'm looking to get a new product to market. I'm looking to better understand my customers. I'm looking to think about where the business category that I'm in might be in 5 years or 10 years. What's the future of our category? Or I have an urgent problem like cybersecurity. There's, all these cyber attacks going on right now, particularly at retail and service level in the UK that are starting to spread globally. They might need help with cybersecurity. They might need help redesigning an app, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, what helps you succeed is being top of mind for leaders, whether that's kind of director level, VP level, all the way to the C-suite in various functions in all kinds of companies of shapes and sizes, that you're on the list of people they call when they need help, or that you get in front of them when they have a problem that you might be able to help with. But ultimately, going back to your question, hopefully it's never quote unquote selling, but that there's a transaction there that is there to help them.
So, but Dave, I guess
I'll bullshit on.
I'm going to pick apart one thing for you. So, what you're talking about is you, with your experience, with your years behind you, have, let's just say, the luxury, and I'm not trying to wordsmith my words here, as already have a brand that people know and a reputation that people hopefully seek out rather than you having to, knock on doors and cold call and things to some
You
degree.
have to do both.
Right. So thinking about someone coming up in the ranks, be Dave from the 90s. If I add to my original question a customer of, picking your level of customers, at one point you're trying to find those people. Obviously it's if word of mouth to anyone listening, and just a side note, if someone would have told me 20 some years ago to network harder than you could ever imagine, and I wish I would have done that, because networking, at least in my opinion, is so enormous of a skill that I think is under promoted when you're trying to come up through the ranks. I think so many people, at least I'll speak for myself, spend so much time in trying to do the thing that you do, whether it's technology or accounting or whatever it is, that I didn't spend enough time meeting other people that I could leverage in later years of my career. But to that point, how do you make that connection to people who don't know who you are yet and but have a need? Do you find the need, or do you find the person, or both, or neither?
So first of all, the word networking is really dirty in my mind, right? I hate it. It feels very transactional. It feels slimy in a way, kind of car dealer.
You just defined me. Thank you so much.
No, not quite the opposite. What I learned early on um, was, in business, you're lucky that you get to meet a lot of people, right? People that you work with directly in your company, and people that you work with from partners, suppliers, customers, yours, et cetera, et cetera. And what I guess something that's helped in my career the whole time, I guess one of my superpowers is knowing a lot of people authentically, not knowing them through networking and trade shows of like trading cards when you meet at a show or something like that. That never really goes anywhere. What I've always tried to do is add value and offer value without expecting anything in return. So a lot of times in a conversation, particularly at an event, I ask people some questions about what's going on with their business, what's troubling them, what's keeping them up at night. And I always offer help. I don't expect anything, but I always say, anytime I can do anything to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out, which might sound, like a throwaway cliche at some time, but it's very authentic and meant. And what that's turned into over, I guess, 35 plus years of work is knowing a lot of people, working with a lot of people, helping a lot of people. And invariably, those, the time you spend helping people turns into a relationship. And those people tend to remember that you did something to help them and didn't expect anything. And at some point, they're going to come to you when they need help with something more serious. So, kind of two ways that goes. One is I ended up about 10 years ago starting to help people with their careers. As you know, we're in a very volatile innovation based economy, plus all the global economic chaos that never seems to go away. The speed of technology is forcing everything to move faster. We're in a place now where um, you know mo- some ridiculous percentage of the Fortune 500 has already gone out of business, no longer exists. Doctors get laid off, lawyers get laid off, not to mention sales,
Right.
marketing, and consulting people. So, what that's really done is create a lot of uncertainty with careers. Quite frequently, people either want to make a voluntary change that they're not happy with the road that they're on, or a necessary change where they've gotten laid off and they quickly need to find another job. I started coaching people on both of those, kind of career innovation and job search, about 10 years ago. I've worked with about more than 1,000 people at this point, and I've found that that's a place to add value for people because nobody gets taught how to manage their career. So whatever line of work you're in, everybody needs help with their career. And I get a lot of people coming to me every week. I get sent a lot of people every week. And I've found that helping people that way, which is something I love to do, is ultimately a way to add value. And those people tend to come back and ask for recommendations when they need help with business problems that they might have, not just career problems. So them, their friends, their family, other people that they work with. And that's become a place where I spend a lot of time and energy, free time and energy, I should say, evenings and weekends. I don't charge any money for it. And those people invariably come back around and ask for work help. So between all the experience I have in places I've worked over 35 plus years and, the thousands of people that I authentically know through that, and then all the other people that I've helped, that adds up pretty quickly to not just a network, but I'd actually call it a community of people that if I need something, I can reach out to and it's never a problem. But more importantly, I can help somebody by connecting them with someone else that I know. So that's where people come to me a lot of times too. Like, hey, do anyone here? Can you introduce me? They're trying to, do business
Yeah,
and
it's
all that.
interesting what you said. So I'm going to say that what I meant by networking is much better defined by you, but I actually do. I would say what I meant by network is exactly what you just laid out, and it's interesting because I heard a lot of my own answers to conversations that I've had when they say, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" Recently, and it's much less money driven. It's much more about value adding, and I love mentoring people. I love training people. I love coaching people. And to your point, it's sometimes I almost feel corny when I say, when I'm talking to even a prospective client, and I say, seriously, your success is more important to me than you buying this thing from me if I'm not the right person. And I sincerely mean it. And then sometimes I get off that call or whatever it is, and I'm like, man, do they think that was a sales pitch too? Because it isn't. So, but I mean, I definitely, I get what you're saying, and I think it's of huge value. And so what I would go back and change what I said earlier is for people coming up through the ranks, make those authentic connections and keep them alive as best you can, whatever its way fits your personality, because it's very important later on. And maybe that's a just don't think about getting the next certification under your belt. Maybe think about helping other people do what they need to do too, because it definitely will pay off in personal rewards and then professional rewards as well.
Yeah, I look at it as the difference between mercenary or a missionary. A mercenary is trying to, basically con you. They're trying to,
Sure.
accomplish something one time, right? They're trying to make a sale. They're trying to do a deal. They're trying to pull one over on you. A missionary tends to be much more purpose driven and committed to something bigger. Yes, they're always trying to, you know, do something in the background of that, but they're in it for a reason. And a lot, like you just mentioned, they're looking to help, they're looking to add value, they're authentic, they're honest in what they do. We're in a world of infinite choice right now. And whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, we have infinite choice. And ultimately, what's the tiebreaker that people decide on? They decide on authenticity, they decide on connection, they'll make their decisions based on gut feel if everything else is equal. And
What,
if it's a price-based thing, then that's a whole different conversation sometimes.
Dave, what do you think? I've had many, like I have this goal set in my head that I try to meet 5 new people a week and have a conversation with them similar to this, but obviously not recording it, just meeting new people. And I do that via LinkedIn, and I find people that are like me or I'd like to know more about them, and I have this exact kind of conversation. Just no sales pitch, not trying to sell a widget, and neither are they, and we just get to know them. And I've noticed over the past, I'm going to say this very unscientifically, maybe the past year or so, that more and more the people I am speaking with are people that are older than 50, that have been either laid off or asked to leave, and they are looking to do the next thing. And it's kind of scary. I mean, for them to tell me, and they're not talking to anyone else about it, they hear it as a one-off kind of thing and they think it's novel. For me, I hear it and I'm like, oh my God, you're the 150th person I've heard you say that. And it starts to really concern me because in my opinion, there are lots of people with lots of deep skill sets and experience and gas in the tank to get things done that are being overlooked because of this highly, what I guess we would call AI transactional new way of doing things, that I don't think it puts a lot of emphasis on the experience that you were talking about, the things, the mentorship, and there's also a lot of people in that same bucket that are thinking about becoming mentors, executive coaches. I mean, it seems like 50% of the people I talk to now are saying I'm going to become an executive coach. And I don't even know where my question's going right now, but I'm wondering, have you seen this? And do you have? I was thinking at first that the pendulum's swinging one way. It's swinging towards the much younger generation, and I said, it's got to start coming back towards the middle, where people have realized the smartest technical tool out there can't solve this human experience that we're talking about. You have to have lived it to get there. And I'm just wondering, have you seen any of that?
A lot of it. That's probably a third of the people that I work with career-wise on career innovation are in that, I'll say 40 age range.
Yeah.
And that could go way up, but at least a third are in that age range. And I call what I do with that career innovation for a reason. What I've found is that take it back again, the point of none of us are taught how to manage our career. And when it comes time for change, most people don't know how to take the first step. When you feel that you're aging out of something, you really start to lose confidence in a lot of ways. But what I've found is that a lot of career innovation, and particularly having a successful career now, is about constant reinvention. What got you started in your 20s and what you learned in school is probably not going to be what you're doing in your 40s and 50s. You will have evolved, you will have learned new things, you will have shifted in a lot of ways. And what I've found is that it's a lot of repositioning of one's personal brand, but also one's approach and targets. Kind of, where can you add value? What are you truly unique and great at? Everybody has that story to tell,
All right.
but they just might not be pointing it in the right direction. Meaning, if you were a VP of sales, I'll make it up, but if you were a VP of sales at a certain company, you probably have a great network and community of people. You probably have great experience running a sales team, but you might be in an industry where you might be aging out of your relevance and value in that space, but you're going to have tremendous relevance and value in another space. And maybe your role isn't VP of sales in somewhere else. Maybe it's a totally different type of role. So part of it is, I see careers as almost like playlists on Spotify as opposed to epic sagas, right? We were taught, you'd learn a skill, you'd go to school, you'd start working, and you'd probably stay in that same career and maybe have a couple changes over time, right? What happens now is much more like playlisting, or like eras, to quote Taylor Swift. People are moving from roles every 2.5 to 5 years on average, is what I see. And the roles they're moving to are either progressive roles, or they might be complete squiggles in a different direction. And I think that's what's really tough for people to get their head around and get their arms around, is what got me there might not get me forward. I have to kind of rethink and reinvent myself and understand how to do that. I've seen a lot of people and worked with a lot of people who've been very successful in shifting, but it requires almost breaking down and starting from scratch in many ways. It's not easy, but it's very, very doable. And most importantly, very rewarding when you can pick a path that you can say, okay, here's where I've been, but I'm going somewhere different and I'm going to change the road I'm on, but that's going to put me in a better place for the next 10, 20,
Right.
however many years I'm going to keep working. And
Yeah,
that's ultimately the switch there is like, you're not just going down the same path. You have to divert.
I also think that when I speak to these individuals, I can hear it in their voice that their self-esteem has taken a hit, and
Value,
yeah,
right?
right. And you start believing whatever the toxicity they came from. They start probably lived in it too long and started to believe the crap. It's an interesting story, and I think the story is still starting. I mean, I think there's
Well,
going to be a lot more.
look at it this way: what we do for work defines us, right?
Sure.
When you meet someone, they don't define themselves. They don't introduce themselves to you as I'm such and such. I'm the father of such and
Yeah, yeah,
him and
yeah. That's
her,
a good point.
and I live here. It's more, here's what I do for a living. That's the first question people ask. So by nature, that
Yeah.
defines who we are. The adage of, we're a product of the five people or environments we spend the most time with. Right? We spend more time at work than we do anywhere else, or doing work, or in the work
Right.
environment, or in the business environment. So by nature, that defines who you are. And when you lose your job, when you're laid off, when you're, squeezed out, whatever that is, right away, that balloon pops. And so many people have a hard time not only knowing what the next step to take is, but making a step forward as opposed to constantly looking where they came from. It's a
Yeah.
really hard thing to do. After
Yeah.
working with all these people, I wrote a playbook for this that is there to help people through this. And that's how I coach people, is really kind of getting past that, defining yourself through work, but
Mhm.
really breaking that down and rebuilding yourself to move in a different,
Any
better
links to
direction.
any of this stuff that you're talking about, Dave? Please provide to me anything that you want to share, and I'll put it in the show notes. I have a question for you. Going, I guess like a next step for the technical side of things. Do you use technical tools to help track all of these people and all these relationships?
Yeah, so formally and informally. So CRM, everybody's got some form of a CRM
Mm-hmm.
system. I've used all sizes and shapes of them, from Salesforce to Microsoft Dynamics to Zoho to spreadsheets to,
Yep. Yep.
all
Yep.
kinds of other things. And I think they all have their pluses and minuses. What I've always found interesting is that a lot of them, the CRM acronym at its center is about relationship and relationship management. But what they really are is a selling system in most cases. It's really to track and manage a sales force, hence the name. And you're much more of an expert at it than I am. But I've found that there's probably two ways to look at it. You need the big system, particularly as a company, to manage contacts and understand what they are and understand sales and pipelines and all those kind of things. But you also need to kind of informally keep track of who you're talking to, how, where, and all those kind of things. So I use some simple things, and then I use the formal CRM things at the same time. And I have a mix of the two. I've never found anything that ties them together. What's interesting, though, is what AI is doing. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a VC yesterday, and their firm has developed a system that combines CRM and a custom built LLM that uses AI to help drive the entire deal process and pushes through a lot of the summaries, a lot of the analysis, a lot of the heavy tasks, and helps them move through diligence and deal flow much, much faster. It's basically CRM. And I think the changes that are happening there are really, really interesting, and where
Yeah.
that's all headed.
Yeah. So offline, we have to talk about that because I've developed several of these platforms that you're talking about, like your VC person was speaking to, that is a combination of known AI tools, my own way that I think the process should work, CRMs, whether it's, as you mentioned, the Salesforce, the HubSpots, whomever. And the way I look at it is I've built AI based workflows that I say either precede a CRM or come after a CRM. So, for example, a workflow that I've built that is definitely a product that I could sell. I'm not don't want to sell it yet, but I probably will. But something that actually goes out and with intelligence and finds, and it gets very complicated, but finds people that are in a particular community that would be somebody that either that's using this workflow would want. So if you're like whatever, a plumber, I mean, I can use this workflow to come out and find people that are plumbers that have, and then go to their website and see what they specifically do, and then analyze their competition and do a ton of analysis up front before it actually kind of pre-qualifies that person for me to even begin to reach out to them, adds them into CRM, and then on the back side of the CRM, using technology again to them up and say, well, would they be best for me to SMS them or call them or email them? And it does this whole workflow. And in the very beginning of our conversation, you were talking about providing things of value add without expecting something in return. Now, this is obviously with the dreams of providing something in the future that is sellable, but you can actually, with all of these tools, provide people with things that are value add that they didn't even ask for, but that are extremely highly relevant to them to do something that they didn't even know existed before in their world. Like, oh my God, I didn't realize these 10 companies ask for permits in the counties that I'm working for this type of building that I build, and I should reach out to them. And so there's a lot of that going on. And I was asked earlier, is there a chance that even the traditional CRM themselves get replaced by these kind of tools? Can that even happen? And I think the answer is yes, but I think the CRM companies themselves are obviously onto this as well, and they're tweaking all this at the same time. But it's very interesting in short order how you can make an extremely intelligent system that just wasn't even possible before. I'm working on something right now that can effectively, and I'm using the words very loosely, cold call somebody that, someone, but in your voice, and you have a real conversation that you would not know it's you. But, obviously you can disclose that it's AI. You don't want to trick somebody. But then when that person has a follow up question, it transfers that call to you, and your voice just continues on. And it's just like, one, I'm just like, I just can't even believe I just built that, but I did. The advances are incredible. So I don't know where everything's going. I do know it's amazing though. So you were mentioning your own personal style with using a formal system and then an informal system, and I have to say that's what I am as well. The formal system is great for reminding me, like, Bozo, you didn't call this dude in 3 months. You might want to pick up the phone. But I mean, but I don't use a system like that to keep a ongoing relationship going. I can do that on my own. So it's kind of like a nudge. Of course, with larger companies, it's required if you have 100 salespeople and you need to see who's meeting certain goals. That's a totally different animal. And even you mentioned Salesforce. I mean, to call Salesforce a CRM now is just ridiculous. I mean, and I know that's not what you said. I mean, I'm just saying they are so far beyond that. It's I don't even know how you define them anymore. So I know we're getting close on time, and I have a couple quick questions for you. What's your favorite sport outside of, for yourself, for marathon running? It sounds like that's the number one right now.
Running and fitness is something I do personally, but I love watching European soccer, actually MLS too in the US and NWSL. So I've always, been close to that, and I'm constantly tracking all the leagues, listening to podcasts, watching a lot of highlights, watching a lot of games. So that's still always been my kind of first and major love sports wise. But
You,
I follow all of them, NBA, NFL, obviously being a diehard Eagles fan, but everything like F1 and professional cycling and things like that too.
so I'm going to give you something that's surprising. So when that original tour that we were talking about that we did way back when into Germany and Austria, I always felt like an outsider at that group because all you guys were playing. We get to somewhere and you guys would all be running outside playing soccer, and I'm just like, I have no idea what this sport is. And I was having fun, but I just didn't get it. I remember the first time I ever played, I was like cherry picking offsides like by 1,000 miles. I'm like, I don't even know what this offside thing is. I just kick me the ball 300 yards and I'll score. But I have become, I think my favorite sport to watch is soccer. I'm predominantly follow the German and the French league, although I am an Arsenal fan, but I pretty much follow Marseille and my wife's hometown of France. And then probably my ultimate favorite team though is Munich. And probably because a lot of our early life journeys in that region, and Formula One. And so I do watch. Oh, I do watch US MLS as well, and I'm hoping it keeps getting better. Dude, I see the
So
picture.
on that trip in
Yeah, yeah, I see it.
1983, a few of us climbed the fence and snuck into the Olympic Stadium in Munich,
Oh, I remember
where
that
Bayern
trip.
Munich
Yeah,
used to
yeah, yeah,
play,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's a picture from the old Olympic Stadium in 1983. I look like I'm 4 years old. Exactly.
What, dude? You were, I mean, you were a smaller guy in high school. I mean, and you hit your growth spurt at the end. So, but we had a great trip on that trip, and I think there's a lot of things that come out of that that seriously have defined us. I mean, you and I were joking about it last time about the infamous almost getting crushed by a train. I remember that day. Like, I tell that story a lot. So, last thing, after a marathon, how long does it take you to recover? How do you do it?
So there's immediate recovery, which is just your digestive system from drinking so much Gatorade and having those gels and all those things that runs havoc with your system. So that after a marathon, I eat a baguette. I actually go find a baguette or I bring one with me, and that's what I eat afterwards. I have a hard time stomaching anything else. Even though I'd love to have a beer, it's usually the last thing I can do. And then what I find is you've got a couple days of aches and pains, but you've got probably 2, 3, 4 weeks of physical and mental exhaustion the older you get as well, that you're just trying to get through. The aches and pains go away pretty quickly. That's like climbing stairs for a
Yeah.
day sucks, but after that you're fine.
I
Not too bad.
remember first half marathon I did with my two daughters who are maybe, I don't know, 20 at the time, and I have twins, and it was the Disneyland California half marathon. We were completely unprepared. I mean, we
Hmm.
were prepared, but not like really prepared. And we got through the finish line. We ran it together the whole way, and I'm not joking. Once you stop moving, your body, I'm sure there's a scientific term for it, just decides, yeah, I'm done for the day.
Yeah.
And we literally had problems walking out of the parking lot to our hotel room. And I remember there was this down ramp just to come off this 5 feet of decline to another level. We were scooching our feet because
It's
we couldn't
brutal.
move anymore.
It's absolutely
And
brutal.
we were
Yeah.
we were like, what have we done to ourselves?
Yeah, exactly. You run 13 miles and you can't walk 20 feet,
It
right?
was so sad. And we had to get
It's
to the
crazy.
airport in a couple hours, and we're just like, I don't think we're doing that. And
Yeah.
so, for your own self, for PA consulting, I mean, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. Two places. So LinkedIn is an easy way to find me. paconsulting.com, all one word. David.Knies at paconsulting.com. And the coaching I do career-wise is via a website called anotherlevelproject.com. Another Level Project.
You must live in a place that has more than 24 hours in a day,
I wish.
because
Right?
you're doing a lot, man, and it sounds like you're doing
Never
a
enough
lot
time.
very, very well at a very high level. Very
Never enough
impressive,
time.
Dave.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Great to see you and great to be here today.
Hey, thank you so much for your time. At best in all you do.
Thanks, Mike.
Hope to see you soon, man.
Appreciate it. You too.
Take care,
See ya.
man. Bye bye.
Bye.